Shut up, compressor.
Take the rainbow!
In the closing months of 2020, Scott Gentry of the Plastic Posse podcast talked me into joining their Ryefield Models T3485 group build. And by talked me into it, I basically mean that he brought it up. Anyway, I got the kit, I built it, painted it, and ended up with what's probably my best armor build to date. But it also forced me to acknowledge that I've accumulated some bad habits when it comes to armor. I build a lot of kits. A lot. That just never make it to primer or to paint. And that's a thing that's only accelerated since COVID and working from home. I can slam together kit after kit while I'm working on messaging documents and landing pages, and sitting through meetings, and they've kind of become like my fidget spinner or notebook to doodle in or something like that. They keep my mind focused instead of wandering off to see what's happening on the internet. But while I can build while working from home, I sure as shit can't paint in weather. And so the backlog stretches out. But even when I do push an armor build through the primer barrier, I still have to run a gauntlet of more bad habits. I'm too restrained. I'm too quick to move into environmental effects like mud and dust. I go in with either too much of a vision or not enough of one. And I end up with builds that all kind of look the same. Nice, nuanced paintwork blown out by the tonal crush of the weathering. Build after build of muddled midtones. The T34 is just the latest example. You can see all these habits stretching back to the Dana, to the T72, the ERC90, AML90, and literally every armor kit that I've built, going all the way back to the Tamiya M4 Sherman that I did in early 2011. Every single one carries a similar clean but dirty aesthetic. Honestly, I'm stuck in it. And one of my goals for 2021 is to break myself out of it. Now, personally, I find breaking bad habits a whole lot harder than developing new skills. And one of the better ways that I've found to do it is to shock the system, to break out of the usual so that you just can't fall back into the same tricks and the same bullshit over and over and over again. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shock the system. And to do this, I'm drawing inspiration from two fantastic armor modelers, even though they have absolutely no clue that I'm doing it. First is J.C. Osborne, who made a crack while I was working on my T34 about all T34s being the same color, which they pretty much are. Now, it was completely innocuous, but it struck me like a lightning bolt. Most tanks are the same color, or like one of two or three colors. But that got me thinking, what if I had to paint a tank yellow or purple? You know, there's a whole rainbow of colors out there that are pretty much irrelevant to armor. And that tiny little kernel, that little stupid thought, is pretty much how the idea of Tank the Rainbow formed. 7 tanks, each required to use one of the colors of the rainbow as the main element of their camouflage scheme. So red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, and violet. The second part of the inspiration comes from the legendary Rick Lawler. In his appearance on the Plastic Posse podcast, he was talking about how he'll impose constraints on himself with certain builds. So, for one, he can only use AK's weathering pencils, for example. For another, he can't use pigments, and so on. Now, I've been planning to link each build to a specific technique, like modulation, black and white priming, things like that, and build from there. But, honestly, I like this idea of constraints a lot better. Both of these elements, the color and the constraint, introduce creative friction into the process. And not from the usual directions of accuracy and research. They're going to force me to think and approach a kit differently. But they're also going to free me from other constraints I've maybe become a little bit too wrapped up in. So, here's how I see this whole thing going down. For the past few months, I've been slowly but surely building up 7 armor kits to the point of primer. All 1/35th scale. I tried to do 1/48 at first, and 1/48 armor kits, I know some people love them, but they're just not for me. So they're all 1/35th scale. They're from a variety of eras, from a variety of manufacturers. Now, to assign colors and constraints to the various kits, I basically wrote everything down in post-it notes, crumpled them up, drew out all the tanks first, then I drew out the colors, then I drew out the constraints. Now, yeah, there were 7 tanks and 7 colors, but I had something like 20 different constraints that I threw into the hat, and so not all of them made it this time around. I may pull those out for future builds, but for now, 7, 7, and 7.
Seven's the key number here. Think about it.
Right.
7
7,
11s,
yeah.
7 dwarfs. 7, man, that's the number. 7 chipmunks twirling on a branch, eating lots of sunflowers on my uncle's ranch. You know that old children's tale from the sea?
Anyway, now that everything is assigned, and now that all the builds are ready for primer, I'm planning to chronicle the experience of painting and weathering them up as a video series. Pretty much my first armor series. Yay! So with that, let's run through the 7 builds, and what's in store for each of them. First up, for Team Red, is Tamiya's excellent little R35 French light tank. Its constraint is that almost everything done on it will have to involve an airbrush in some capacity, and I have to figure out what the fuck I'm going to do to pull off red camouflage. Next, in orange, is going to be Takom's PL01. This futuristic Polish prototype tank drew the incongruous constraint of heavy fading. Yellow goes to the AFV Club FV4005, a kind of KV2ized version of the British Centurion tank. Its constraint? Hasbro. Now, what the fuck does Hasbro mean? Well, it means it's going to get done up as a vehicle in one of Hasbro's various franchises, like Transformers or G.I. Joe. 2 words for any of you fellow children of the 80s. Tiger Force. The safe green square goes to Tamiya's M3 Stuart. But I'm going to consciously not go with olive drab and intentionally move towards something a bit more brighter and a bit more saturated. As for the M3 straitjacket, it's going to be acrylics only. No lacquers, no oils, no enamels. Now, Tamiya and Guns Mr. Hobby are still in play, but only if they're thinned with water or X20A or whatever. Ouch. Blue goes to the Takom Blitz Panzer III Osif N, and its constraint is that it has to use hairspray effects, which probably makes it the easiest of the constraints of this entire bunch, because I love me some hairspray effects. Indigo belongs to the Ryefield Models T34/122. Yes, that crazy Egyptian modded T34 with the big-ass turret basically built over and around the original 85 turret. I'm still not entirely sure how Indigo is different from Blue, but I've got some ideas for a nifty camo job anyway. Its constraint? Brush chipping only. No hooray spray. And finally, Violet. Violet goes to the Takom M60A3. Now, I was going to use AFV Club's M60A2 Starship, because I find the Starship a very difficult tank to take seriously, which makes it perfect for this challenge. But AFV Club kits have a certain tediousness to them that just sucks at my enthusiasm. So Takom got a last-minute audible. Its constraint? I'll be tackling it using the black and white method. And I may push that further into some object source lighting if I really want to make myself cry. So, how is this all going to work exactly? Well, you'll get to find out with me. Right now, I'm thinking I'll probably try to do 1 or maybe 2 episodes per tank, recording a ton of footage and then providing a voiceover rather than my usual multi-part stream of consciousness thing that I do with my aircraft builds. But there's also every chance that that plan will completely fall apart, and each one of these tanks will get a bit of like a multi-part series kind of a thing. I don't know yet. We'll have to kind of see how it goes. And I would also note that these are going to take a while. 7 tanks is more than the total number of kits I finished last year. So if I get them all out before the calendar rolls over to 2022, I'll be impressed. Anyway, that is the plan. That is my big grand armor thing for 2021. Stay tuned for the first Tank the Rainbow videos to start showing up soon. And as always, if you want exclusive early access to new videos, as well as behind the scenes stuff and my various ramblings and ideas, feel free to join my Patreon at patreon.com/dukesmodels. Your support over there helps make things like this crazy, silly venture possible, and it's super appreciated. And that pretty much wraps it for this intro. Thanks for watching, and if you find this whole thing weird, I hear ya. It is weird, and it's more than a little bit ridiculous. It all makes perfect sense like in my head, but I've been struggling with what exactly it's going to look like and how to articulate that for months now. And I think as the tanks start rolling and as the weird colors go down and you see what I'm trying to do and what habits I'm trying to break with this, it'll start to make a lot more sense. So stay tuned, and I'll catch y'all later.